Hallo und welcome to Gegenpressing, the Bundesliga podcast. I'm Manu. He is Stefan Piankowski. This is the last preview show of the 2024-2025 season. And it's technically speaking not even a Bundesliga pod, Stefan. It's the DFB Pokal final preview. I actually just remember last year we did this. I was already in Berlin. I think we did it the Friday before the final, Leverkusen against Kaiserslautern. This week we're a little bit early, but mostly because I'm actually driving to Berlin on Friday, so I won't have much time. So we're doing it on the Thursday rather than the Friday. But before we dive into this German Cup final between Bielefeld and Stuttgart, how's it going, bud? How's your week been?
Yeah, good, good. I'm really looking forward to this game. We've had a lot of fun this week doing a couple of bonus shows. We did a
Hmm.
live bonus show last night with some subscribers from the Substack and our YouTube members.
Yeah.
Got through a whole bunch of questions like, will Dortmund sign Cherki? Will Goretzka join Dortmund? At one point was questioned,
Yeah.
and what's obviously happened to Kofeld, the once upon a time the head coach, and a whole bunch of other stuff, Verts and all that stuff. So it was really good doing a live show and having listeners tune in and chat away to us. But yeah, I'm looking forward to this weekend's football. And this must be how many Pokal finals have you now made consecutively?
Okay, so I missed two during COVID, and I did every single one after COVID. So I saw Leipzig win it twice after COVID. Then I saw last year Leverkusen, and this is my fourth in a row since the pandemic. And I did three before the pandemic. Obviously, there was one that we weren't all, no one was allowed to go. And then the second one during the pandemic, I wasn't allowed to leave Canada. So, so I think that's a legitimate excuse. So considering, so across those, minus the COVID ones, it's seven now in a row. Yeah, I like this game. I like going to the final in Berlin. I think it's a really nice way of ending the domestic campaign. And I think it's really nice that in Germany, I know it's not the case in England with the FA Cup final. It's kind of smacked in between the last two match days or even earlier than that. I like the fact that in Germany, it is the the moment the curtain comes down on the season is literally when the Pokal is handed out to one of the winners. And it's also nice because, of the German Cup finals I've seen, I think only one of them was won by Bayern. In fact, I think only two of them Bayern was in it. They were in it against Frankfurt, and the year after they won it against Leipzig. Then I missed the two COVID ones, and then since COVID they haven't been in the final. And
Mm.
so, it's also nice to see other teams participating in the German Cup. Of course, we had the Leipzig wins twice against Freiburg and Frankfurt, and then we had Leverkusen last year, and then this year we have Stuttgart against Bielefeld. So it's been a really nice mix of different teams, and I think this year I'm really looking forward to it because I think this is the most. I mean, Kaiserslautern Leverkusen was quite an interesting um, contrast, but this year is about as much of a contrast as you can get with a team that this season played Champions League and a team that played in the Dritte Liga, in the third division in Germany. So I'm really looking forward to this one, Stefan, and I think it's such a wonderful moment to cap off our domestic campaign.
Oh, excuse me. Yeah, I think it's fascinating because I think usually, like if you think about like kind of domestic cups across Europe, a club like Stuttgart, who, yeah, okay, ambitious club, going to the Champions League, but more or less a mid-table club at this moment in time, would probably be considered the minnows more often than not in a cup final.
Hmm.
But they're kind of like the they're the giants, if you will, going into this game because they're up against a team who are in the the third tier of German football, or the
Yeah.
fourth tier of German football, and it's great. Yeah, I've had people here in the UK kind of talk to me about it, saying they've taken note of it. Saying how cool it is to have a club like Bielefeld in the final. Um, and it is, and it has been for quite some time, a real saving grace
Mm.
in German football. I think because obviously Leverkusen kind of shook things up last season by winning the Bundesliga, but before that, we were obviously staring at just consecutive, Bayern Munich title wins, and it was really refreshing that they weren't able to kind of dominate the Pokal as the Bundesliga. Um, and German football, more often than not, has had this opportunity to kind of celebrate two other clubs reaching it. Unfortunately, for most clubs in Germany, that other club who tends to win it seems to be Leipzig for some bizarre reason. They've got some bizarre hold of this competition, but not this time around.
Made the
So yeah,
semi-final though. They still made the semi-final this year. They
they
lost the
did.
cup.
Yeah, they did. They do indeed love that cup.
You know, my theory behind that is that unlike the Meisterschale, you can pour a Red Bull into the DFB Pokal. This is why they love it so much.
Yeah. Well, do you know what's quite interesting? I was watching a video about the Red Bull Formula One team the other day, and I didn't realize this until I watched this kind of documentary. But when you go into their offices, which are in England somewhere, their lobby is just wall to wall trophies that the Formula One team have won, and they go like all the way up to the roof. They go like 30 feet high because they've won insane amount of trophies like at every level. And I wonder if Leipzig have kind of taken that and thought, right, we need to start filling up our lobby with trophies, and the easiest way to do that is just with Pokals, because obviously it costs a lot more money to win the Champions League or the Bundesliga. So yeah, they've obviously prioritised to fill up that lobby with Pokals, but not today, and
Not
not this
today.
year, not this season. Sorry.
No, not this season, not last. I mean, Stuttgart won it last in. Oh, have to think. I think they won the double. In in I have to double check this. I have the moment in my head, um, but I don't remember the last time it happened. 1997 under Joachim Löw,
Hmm.
Stefan. They won the DFB Pokal last, and then the following year, they lost to Chelsea in the old UEFA Cup Winners' final. Remember that tournament when the cup winners would play in their own separate European competition, made it all the way to the final and lost to Chelsea. That was Joachim Löw. That Stuttgart job where he is actually quite successful. That launched his career. So a long time ago, and they now have the opportunity to win the German Cup. They've won a German championship since, so this is not no the last time that they won a title, but you know it's been a few years for them as well. And then of course Arminia Bielefeld, um, they have not won a major domestic trophy. They have won what they call the Landespokal, which is what qualifies you for the DFB Pokal if you're not in one of the top two divisions. And so they have won that a few times, but this would be their first ever trophy. And in fact, if they win this thing, it'd be the first time ever Bielefeld would play in Europe.
Hmm. Yeah, and I mean, when was the last time a team in this tier of German football reached the final? Would it have been not Union Berlin, Hertha Berlin's second team, maybe?
No, so Stuttgart actually beat a third division team when they did it in 1997. But
Was that before or after the Hertha Berlin final, though?
that was after. Uh,
After, okay, yeah, because that was like
yes, it
92 or
was
something, wasn't it, maybe?
after.
Or maybe 89 or something.
And Union Berlin did reach a DFB Pokal final, and I think that was in 2001, and they lost 2-0 to Schalke. And that was the last time a third division team reached the final. Stuttgart beat Energie Cottbus.
Hmm. Okay.
So yeah, both, and I have to add Union Berlin, Energie Cottbus, and now Bielefeld also got promoted that year from the third division.
Yeah. Yeah.
Arminia Bielefeld even won the third division this year. So they play good football. It's a team. They could be the first to win it as a third division team. We have seen Hannover 96 won it in 93 as a second division team. And then of course, you know, last year we had a lower division team in Kaiserslautern, and they came. I actually, you know, being at that final, that result was very close for Leverkusen, despite the fact that Leverkusen were man up. And so, you know, we can see a lot can happen in the 90 minutes. And it was actually a really good interview with Michel Kniat, or Mike Kniat, as the people at Bielefeld that in charge of Bielefeld call him, in Kicker today. And I thought it was very insightful the way he kind of they ask him, well, what's the plan of in this game and how are you going to approach this game? And he's like, what kind of question is that? We approach the game like we want to win it. If you reach a German Cup final, you want to win it. Like we're not there to just have a good time in Berlin. And I like that answer. And he gave me a really interesting answer too. And he said, um, they asked him, is it difficult to play against a team from the Bundesliga? And I actually really like this answer because it's something that hasn't been said before. He said it's actually easier to play Bundesliga teams because they're tactically so much more involved that they have a structure and they have a repetitive structure that is much easier to analyze than playing against lower division teams that are far more chaotic. And I actually thought that was a really interesting thing to say. You know, repetition, I guess, is what killed the likes of Bayer Leverkusen on Berlin's on Arminia Bielefeld's path to the German Cup final. The fact that these teams are so tactically evolved that we all know how they kind of play has been detrimental to them. And I thought that was really interesting, Stefan.
Yeah, it is. And, they're such a fascinating team for the manner in which they've reached the final because typically clubs who, in their position, who reach these kind of finals have had a degree of luck. They've maybe the luck of the draw, they've avoided big teams in the final. But then you look at Arminia Bielefeld's kind of run to the final, and you would say that they've absolutely deserved to be here because they've beaten more or less half the Bundesliga at this point. So for anyone who didn't know, they beat Hanover in the first division, obviously not in the Bundesliga. Then they beat Union Berlin 2-0. Then they beat Freiburg 3-1, Werder Bremen 2-1, and Bayer Leverkusen then 2-1 in the semi-finals. So they've been really kind of working their way up the Bundesliga table, to be honest, to this point. And it's so fascinating having watched the way that they've played in this competition because I think his comments really do chime with the way that Bielefeld have played, and I would say they have kind of played this kind of really fearless attacking football. They've not sat deep, they've not played extremely defensive football and won out of sheer luck. They've been dominant. I remember in that Werder Bremen game that I watched. They really went toe to toe with Werder Bremen. Bremen certainly had periods of control in that game, and maybe Bielefeld were a little fortunate the way that Marvin Dukes obviously went off injured a couple of minutes into the match. And I think in just about every tie, well, at least the Leverkusen and the Bremen tie, Bielefeld's opposition hit the post, and Freiburg obviously missed a penalty. So they have kind of somewhat rode their luck a little bit, but you look at the goals they've scored, some outstanding long-range shots, some outstanding team plays. The fact that left-back Louis Ope is like so instrumental to this team, the way he scores and creates chances. He's got 9 assists this season. And it was really important to actually one of the goals against Leverkusen. So that we're talking about left-backs bombing forward to your midfielders like Maximilian Wörl, tremendous as well, kind of going box to box. It's a team that are pretty fearless in how they play, and they've come up against every single one of these kind of Bundesliga sides, and they've not really shown any degree of insecurity or this kind of sense of being, worse off than the Bundesliga side. And I think that's really interesting, Manu, because it's obviously something that has been instilled from the head coach, but it's obviously a fact that they are a team with a lot of kind of good young players in them. You can kind of go through that entire squad really, and name a whole bunch of people. Jonas Kerskin, the goalkeeper, I think he's been excellent in this competition, whether saving penalties against Freiburg, an outstanding one-on-one save against Werder Bremen, if I'm not mistaken, as well. So they've just kind of got an interesting group of players throughout this team, and it feels like everything's kind of come together at the right time for them. And it's why they've kind of managed to continue taking Bundesliga teams by surprise. Sorry, but it's interesting. I was reading an interview with Undav, the Stuttgart striker, this week, and he was saying, "No, look, we're going to treat this game as if we're playing Bayern Munich or Real Madrid." And it'll be interesting to see how that kind of plays out in the final, because I think even Leverkusen, despite the fact that it was a semi-final, probably took Bielefeld a little bit for granted. But you just can't do that in a final like this. There's just no way about it. So it'll be interesting to see how Stuttgart actually approach Bielefeld as opposed to Bielefeld approaching Stuttgart.
I have to say, maybe the book has been kind of written now on Bielefeld. One of the reasons why they are so very difficult to analyze is that when they put the squad together, I spoke to Christoph Wortmann, their CEO, for an article on Forbes, still on Forbes. You can still read it. It's very insightful. I spoke to him for almost an hour. Not everything made it into an article as it often is, but it's a very interesting man. And when they got relegated, they went down from the first to second to the third division, right? And then almost in the first year in the third division, almost went down to the fourth division. It was really dire. The club was under enormous financial distress. And as they went down, I think only Klose was under Fabian Klose was under contract. Everyone else was without a contract because the players only had contracts for the first and second division, but not the third division. And so, they hired Kniat, and by the time they had their finances together and actually got the license for the third division, most players were already off the market. So they had to phone around and try to find players without contract and bringing up players from the U19, and it was absolutely chaotic. And then they survived that first year in the third division, right? Which was a really tough season for them, and that's sort of when they started to put this team together. And the second teams, so the Bundesliga second teams that play in the Dritte Liga side. This Bielefeld team is the team with the youngest squad, average age of just 24.6. This is a very young team. And I think one of the things that kind of came together for them is the fact that people just didn't know them, right? And it took them the first full year where they kind of stabilized it. And then the first half this season was difficult. They were well out of the promotion zone. It really was the second half of the season where they kind of stormed to the top of the table. First into the promotion zone and then actually won the Dritte Liga, right? Which is it's a huge achievement. But by the time they kicked out Leverkusen, they were not close to the promotion zone yet, right? And this is I think is fascinating, is because I think as they got better, and as they grew together as a team and obviously went on this fantastic run, and this is kind of a weird thing to say, I actually think, how Kniat said it's easier to analyze teams like Stuttgart because we know how they play. This might actually be true for them now because people have seen how they've played. They played obviously really well in the Pokal. I actually think that Leverkusen result, it should have been higher. They dominated Leverkusen at times, right? But now we have video on them. We have video of them in the Pokal run. We have video on them on the last 8 or 9 match days in the third division. And so I actually wonder if Sepp Hoeneß sits down and thinks, yeah, okay, I think I figured these guys out.
Well, you'd certainly hope so, because Stuttgart have absolutely stunk up the Bundesliga this season. They bombed out
They
of
have,
Europe.
yeah.
And, I did my manager power rankings today, and, I don't want to give away too much, but Sebastian Hoeneß does not come out well in it at all, based on how Stuttgart have done the Bundesliga. So they've kind of put all their eggs in this basket, and I think he's got a really interesting kind of managerial showdown here with Mitch Kniat, because if you actually look at his managerial record, he's only 39, but it's quite prestigious, really. Almost like he's this kind of young prodigy. Starts off in the kind of Paderborn second team. He takes them from 13th to 4th in the league over the course of 3 seasons. Finished 13th, then finished 8th, and finished 4th. Steps away from that to do another role at the club. Comes back when they're 14th and takes them to 1st. He then moves to Vale, if I'm not mistaken, Manu. And he first season in the third league takes him from 16th, and then in the second season takes him up to 10th. And equally, takes over Bielefeld after they get relegated, finishes 14th, stables the ship last season. Now he's taken them up to 1st. So in just about every managerial position he's had to date, he's taken a club, stabilised it, and then he's just flew them up the league tables. And
lots of teams looking at him, I tell you that.
Well, yeah, exactly. That's what I was about to say. Like, not only is he making waves in the third league, but the whole of Germany will be watching how he can do against what many would consider like one of the most impressive young head coaches in German football right now. A very keen tactician in Stuttgart, in Hoeneß, that is. So I think it's going to be a really interesting match. I really do. I think it's. I think people who maybe don't follow the league or follow German football maybe look at it and think, well, it's going to be a game where Stuttgart just hammer Bielefeld for 90 minutes. But I think it's going to be a very open, very attacking football game.
I think so. I actually, if I mean, was in 1997, so I have to refresh my memory. I remember watching the game, the final between Stuttgart and Energie Cottbus, and from what I recall, it was a really tight match. And I mean, we already referenced last year's final, right? Yeah, it was 2-0. Giovanni Elber scored both goals, but I remember this was not a Stuttgart just completely destroyed Energie Cottbus kind of final, right?
Hmm.
And I remember last year, I mean, Kaiserslautern really made the most of a Leverkusen side that was kind of running out of gas towards the end of the season, right? So um, I think that this is by no means a game where Stuttgart can just walk in and say, ah, yeah, we're the Bundesliga side. We're going to dominate this game and win it. And yet you have to remember too, the there is the lower divisions in Germany. The drop off isn't really that big. We see
Hmm.
teams all the time go from the third division to the Bundesliga within a matter of 2 years. Like consecutive promotions are not uncommon, right? There's a big story right now of Elversberg who could achieve their fourth promotion in 5 years. Um, and so, it is the path up is very quick. The path down can be quick too. Same reason, right? Paderborn almost went from the Bundesliga straight to the Regionalliga a few years ago, and the only reason they didn't go all the way down is because my club 1860 decided to completely melt down and take their spot. Um, but it is a quick path up and it's a quick path down. So you could be playing a Bielefeld side that the season after next could be in the Bundesliga. Is what I'm saying. And so, this is sort of what you have to plan with. This is a team that I think in the second division next year is going to play a significant role. And so, you have to treat it accordingly. You can't just expect it to go in there and say, okay, well, we're going to steamroll them. Having said that, this Stuttgart team is a lot better than the results were this year. I think what rescues them a little bit is that ahead of the season they said our goal is to finish in the top nine. They just about did that, Stefan, by winning the last three games, finishing ninth. The form in the last three Bundesliga games has been significantly better than it was for the most of the season. And so,
Helped that they played three teams with nothing to play for. Well,
it
Leipzig
did.
did have something to play for, but
Leipzig.
they're
I mean, I
useless.
thought their performance against Leipzig was very impressive, right? And so, and that does show that maybe they too are getting their stuff together there. But yeah, I mean, if they play like they did play for significant parts of the season where they seemed, especially in defense, seemed in disarray. And as you mentioned, Bielefeld have some fast guys. It's a young team with a lot of speed, very well organized. I think they could really hurt Stuttgart there.
Yeah, and Bielefeld obviously have Julian Kania up front, the 23-year-old
Mm,
forward, 15 goals this season, if I'm not mistaken.
that's correct.
Maximilian Vorl, who I've mentioned, the midfielder, has
Yeah.
been outstanding. He's got 6 goals.
Marius. Stefan, Marius.
Is it Marius? I thought I've got
Yeah,
Max. I've got
Marius
Max.
well.
I got Maximilian written down here for some reason.
Well, you know what?
Um,
That's not wrong. Like every second child in Germany is named Maximilian. So you.
yeah, that's a good point. Actually, I don't know why I've got that written down. Yeah, I mean, he's obviously 9 goals and 7 assists as well. Actually, I'm trying to remember which goal he was. He scored. I think he scored an outstanding goal against Werder Bremen, maybe. Um, I don't know which one it was, or maybe it was an assist against Freiburg. I'm thinking he definitely scored against Leverkusen as well. So yeah, they're a team full of attacking players. Stuttgart, I don't know where to start with Stuttgart. I've been really disappointed with Stuttgart this season. I know you give them
Mm,
a benefit of doubt, and I do appreciate they
I,
had a
I
really
I
tricky.
do. Yeah.
Um, that's that kind of Southern German brotherhood, I think, that we're seeing there. The Swabian, Bavarian loving. Uh,
Uh,
but yeah, I mean, I think I don't know. I think there's actually a bit of pressure on Stuttgart to win this game. To be honest with you, Manu, I know
yeah.
we just spent 20 minutes talking about how good Bielefeld are, and obviously people who know their stuff will appreciate that Bielefeld are no knockovers, but Stuttgart are still the heavy favourites for this.
Hmm.
the manner in which they did bow out of the Champions League without a huge amount to say for themselves. I know they performed particularly well against Real Madrid and they got that big win against Juventus, but and maybe you could argue they just had a really tough run of it, but um, uh, that didn't really work out for them as we would have hoped. Obviously, I was really expecting them in the second half of the season to kind of kick on after the Champions League because I was willing to give them the benefit of the doubt because obviously they're up against it, the Champions League.
Mm.
A lot of pressure, a lot of kind of it makes you very tired. Obviously, playing against best teams in Europe. But after Christmas, just think things just completely fell apart from them. They've had so many injuries. We talked about this in the bonus show. Just how the sheer size of that squad is just baffling, to be honest with you. Stuttgart need two head coaches, not one, with the amount of players they've got. Um, and it felt like Hoeneß had almost too many options to pick from.
Mm.
And, I think that's a squad which we said in the bonus show would really benefit from being chopped, easily cut 5 or 10 guys from that squad. And I think it would do Hoeneß a world of good next season because consistency just wasn't there. Even if you're just going to want to look at the forward players, like there wasn't any real kind of standout forward. I know Voldemar has done very well, and I'm sure we can talk about him in a minute, but he only really came into it in the second half of the season, obviously. And Brun Larsen came in January, who did well. Jamie Levlin was his world beater at the start of the season, who's kind of tailed off because of injury. Demirovic came in, started well, hasn't worked out. There was so much buzz around Undav joining
Mm.
permanently, and he's obviously had injury problems as well. And then, as I said in the bonus show, there's Il Bilal Toure, this young player they signed from Atalanta for a decent amount of money, still very highly regarded. Chris Fuhrik's another one as well. Like, there's just so many forwards in this squad, all vying for positions. And while the perceived wisdom is always that competition does make these guys better, it kind of feels like none of them have really been able to kind of nail down like a full starting role, and any of them have actually really played a full season, to be perfectly honest with you. Some of that's down to form, some of that's down to injury, but if you were to ask me to predict the starting 11 for this game, you'd be better just getting an 8 ball, a magic 8 ball out and just kind of tossing that around for 10 minutes because I think it'd be impossible to guess who Hornets will pick from. Maybe some guys like you'd obviously expect. Well, I was going to say Angelo Stiller, but he's out injured actually, so not even
So
he.
he might be able to play the
Okay,
game.
well,
So,
he's down as a maybe. I guess you could say
yeah.
Alexander Nobel's definitely set to start. Maybe Nick Voldemata as well, but it's a very weird thing going on at Stuttgart right now. And if it was any other head coach, I would say they're in serious trouble. But obviously, Stuttgart trust in Sebastian Hoeneß, and I absolutely think they should. I'm not suggesting they shouldn't, but I think this summer they're going to have to take a chainsaw to that squad. But beforehand, they've got this cup final to win. And I think if they go out in this game and Bielefeld turn them over like they've done with Freiburg, like they've done with Werder Bremen, like they've done with Leverkusen, then I think the Stuttgart board have a serious, complete understanding. They can turn around and be like, you should have done better there, Seb.
No, absolutely. It's actually funny when you look on Stuttgart's Transfermarkt page, and I think 80% of the squad is like new signings, so players that have returned from loan. And the only other club page that I think looks like that on our site is San Diego FC, the expansion team in MLS, where every single player is new. It's just like and a full team of new signings. And I think that was probably one of the big issues this year, that the turnover was so incredibly high that because a few key players left and then you had to replace them, and they kind of fell a little bit into the trap that trying to replace one player with two other guys and hoping that one of them works out. And then, of course, the Champions League was another issue, so you have to have a bigger squad. And the question is too, what will happen with this team if they beat Bielefeld and reach the Europa League as a result? You still need a big squad, right? So do you just hope that the team stabilizes based on the signings that you did last year, right? Because you can't really have a big turnover like this again.
Hmm.
Not if you want to have improvements and push back to get into back into the top six in the Bundesliga, where I think they belong. So it's a tricky position for them, and I think so much for Stuttgart, and I think I completely agree with you. So much hinges on them winning this German Cup final, because they win that. Then they have reached their minimum goal in the Bundesliga, which is ninth, right? They officially communicated that. Mind you, though, with some horrendous football, I think at one stage they had 5 games in a row that they didn't win at home, which is a terrible stretch, And so if they do finish ninth and they win the German Cup, I think they can say look back in the season, it's like, oh yeah, success. I mean, that's how easy football can be, right? It's like, yeah, we won the German Cup. We're here with silverware. We're qualified for the Europa League. Second year in a row that we're international. We didn't even have the Europa League in our mind. We would have been happy with just a top 9 finish. Success. But then, of course, the flip side of that is Bielefeld do what they have done. Marius Wörl scores for the third time in a row against the Bundesliga team, and then all of a sudden you're looking there and saying, well, this was kind of disappointing, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. There's also that aspect of a trophy for Sebastian Hoeneß as well. Obviously he's done so well at Stuttgart, it's taken him to unprecedented heights in the modern era. Not historically speaking, because obviously they've won quite a lot in the past, but it'd be great for him to kind of have something to show for that over the hard work he's done over the last kind of 2 or 3 years. Obviously, people appreciate what he's done. Stuttgart fans appreciate what he's done. But to have a Pokal trophy to his name, I think, would be huge for Hoeneß and for Stuttgart. It seems more than likely that he'll stay put this summer. I think he's probably nailed down for to keep going. And to be fair, I think a large reason for that squad being the size it is because they probably maybe expected more players to be sold in the summer and didn't, but they already had the lineup, the replacements lined up. Or maybe they've already lined up the replacements with the intention of selling players this summer. For example, Jamie Levlin or Enzo Milo, guys like that, who have obviously attracted a huge amount of interest in the last kind of couple of years. Valdemar is a good example as well. He'll probably have offers this summer after just being called up to the German national team today, actually. Of course, Angelo Stiller as well. So that squad's full of exciting young players, there's no doubt about it. It's just been very hard to kind of get them all to play in the same team for much of this season. So, yeah, I think it's going to be such a fascinating game, though, Mario. It's
Hmm.
hard one to actually tactically preview because obviously I have no idea how Stuttgart are going to line up, and Bielefeld, aren't the kind of typical defensive side. So I think it's going to be fun, attacking, open, chaotic football, which has typically suited Bielefeld in this competition. I think one of the reasons they've managed to really kind of get to where they are now is because they took advantage of Werder Bremen being a bit all over the place and open at the back. Bayer Leverkusen were extremely sloppy. I think Freiburg were probably just very complacent when they played them, missing penalties and stuff like that, and huge
Yeah.
chances as well. And I'm not sure if Freiburg actually played their full strength team in that game. I might be mistaken. And then they played Union Berlin before they kind of got their act together. So um, it's going to be interesting to see what happens, but it does kind of feel to me like there's some sort of cosmic force at play here that is guiding
Yeah.
Bielefeld through this competition. So I think Stuttgart will have to be at their very best to win this game.
No, 100%. I actually looking at the Leipzig lineup for Stuttgart, again, a game that they played very well at, is probably a pretty good indication of how they could line up against Bielefeld. So they had Nübel in goal, right? They had Chabot, Xhaka, Hendricks in defense, three in the back, Karasor, Milo playing as the double pivot in midfield, then Mittelstädt and Wagnermann as the wing backs, Undav and Leveling as the double 10, and Woltemade as the number 9. Stiller is a maybe for this game. He may be playing this game. Could be back just in time. If he's back, I would suspect they would put him in this game because he's such a stabilizer in midfield. But I do actually think this what is it, a 3-3-5-2 or it's a 3-4-2-1 is probably a pretty good indication of what Hoeneß could be doing here, Stefan. Because Leipzig, when you look at Leipzig's lineup and their traditional lineup, right, has been mostly a 4-4-2 or 4-2-2 if you prefer that, or 4-4-2 for double six. Bielefeld like to play in this traditional 4-3-3, right? With Corbeau, the French American midfielder and captain of the team, sort of being the pivot man. Wörl on the left, and then Grodowski and Basé and up top. Okania has been the very successful striker up front, who is on loan from Nuremberg. You've mentioned him. So I actually wonder if the Leipzig game that's how Hoeneß envisions his lineup.
Yeah, with a back three of sorts.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the interesting thing was that against Leverkusen, Bielefeld had a lot of success getting down behind Frimpong in the wing back position.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned Louis Opie, the left back. He's done tremendously well in this competition. He bombs
Fast.
forward.
Yeah.
And I mean, I mean, obviously, maybe playing a wing back maybe kind of plays into his strengths, but equally, the wing back might just be, which is obviously a Wagnerman who's very capable, might just be he might just be on that pitch to be like, right, keep an eye on Louis Opie, and then he's got someone like Henriks behind him to offer support, as opposed to Leverkusen, where Frimpong is usually playing, higher than the striker most of the game, and that right wing is just kind of left to defend itself for the most part. So that'll be interesting to see how Stuttgart kind of line up in that regard. Obviously, Milo in for Stiller makes things a bit more attacking. I know Karazor's obviously there; he's a bit more defensive midfielder, but I mean, Stiller can play an attacking role, but he is a kind of holding number 6. So if it is Milo in there instead of him, then that would suggest to Stuttgart a bit more attacking. But that could also be in there far more open to counter attacks as well. We mentioned that Bielefeld obviously have a lot of talent in the middle of the park as well there, so it'll be interesting to see how they do line up Stuttgart, and it shows the quality of Bielefeld and the respect that they've now demand, that as opposed to them trying to react to Stuttgart's tactics, we might actually see Stuttgart react to Bielefeld's tactics and be more proactive in that regard. So yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens here. But like I said, I have no idea how to call this game.
I don't either. I'm really looking forward to this game because last year it kind of felt like Leverkusen were going to win it, and yes, they made it close enough, and it was fascinating. And the Kaiserslautern fans were tremendous, right? The way that they took over the one end of the stadium and really won the game off the pitch. I think this year we're going to see both ends of the stadium just being a spectacle. I'm pretty sure all of Stuttgart is going to be at the DFB Pokal final, and I'm pretty sure the German Secret Service will find 40,000 people to pretend that Bielefeld is a real place and send them there. Just to play into the conspiracy theory that Bielefeld is, what is it? It's a front to like show the true nice German life to the east, something like that. It's a wonderful thing. There's an entire Wikipedia page on this, the Bielefeld conspiracy theory. We had one of our friends go to Bielefeld. It's a real place. I've been assured that there's people living there. This
Yeah,
is not just some like secret German Secret Service kind of act to make sure that people think that Bielefeld is a real place by having them all the way to the German Cup final.
yeah, I should say it wasn't us that actually paid that person. That's not where the subscriber or podcast money's going to. They chose to do it on their own. But yeah, they take their word for it because I can't say I've ever been out that neck of the woods.
Neither have I. I've known people that studied there. They've come back, so it must be a real place. No, but all jokes aside, it is such a cool event because the DFB and the city of Berlin dedicates certain areas of the city where the fans can congregate and hang out. And then of course, they take over all these little boats that go up and down the Spree, the river cruises. And so the entire weekend you're there, you just see like these boats full with fans and flares going up and down the river, and it's such wonderful scenes. And I'm pretty sure that because both these teams come from places that haven't been regularly in the final, I think a lot of fans will be there from both teams. And that's a great spectacle. I just love it. I think it's just such a wonderful thing.
Yeah, that's been one of the great things about the Pokal. I mean, like I was going to say, without Bayern, and obviously Bayern bring a huge amount of fans themselves, so there's that aspect to it from all over the country, from all over the world, really. But yeah, when you do have these clubs in it, they do kind of bring a whole kind of horde of fans with them to the capital. So it's going to be a great game. It's going to be a great day. I'm really looking forward to it, and a kind of great send off to the season, really.
Yeah, as it should be. The season should end with the domestic cup. I think it's great that the DFB did it this way. It's not always been like that. It's only been like that for a few years, but I think this is the way to do it. It's the best way to ensure that it gets sort of it gets the closing act. That the closing act is in Berlin and in Köln, where the women play their final. Can't forget that, and that's, I think, the way to do it. Finish the season off with the domestic cup. I personally think we should take it one step further. I think the winner of this competition should be playing in the Champions League, but can't have everything.
Don't know if the Bundesliga would ever agree to that, but
could you imagine Bielefeld in the Champions League next year? Awesome.
I don't think the Bundesliga's coefficients could handle that, to be perfectly honest with you, considering the way that Stuttgart and the likes have been playing recently in the Champions League. But thank God for Dortmund. Thank God Dortmund turned into this absolute monster in the Champions League every year, or else we'd be in real trouble, I think.
Dortmund and Bayern and Frankfurt, they saved the bacon.
Manu, before we finish up, can I make one short announcement, actually? Because I know you're about to kind of... I spoke to Tom Ritchie this week, who has a Substack called The 56, so it's called the Bundesletter, and he's doing this initiative called D56, a tour of Germany, one football club at a time, and he's basically next season looking to try and go to all 46 teams, clubs in the top 3 tiers. He actually interviewed me for his podcast this week, but he's got a Kickstarter up where he's looking to raise some money to help fund him doing this. So it's called D56. You can definitely find him on Substack. Just search Tom Ritchie Bundesletter. So it's like Bundesliga, but letter instead of Liga. And from there, you'll definitely be able to find his Substack or his Kickstarter as well. Cool. So take a look at that. I said I'd give him a shout out because it seems like a kind of cool cause, and I think a lot of people listening to this podcast would be interested in it.
Absolutely, that's awesome. What a cool idea. 56 stadiums in Germany. Yeah.
Yeah, he must have no wife or kids because no. I don't think I can.
Yeah.
I give you grief for going to too many games this season. I don't even know what your wife says.
Well, she gets trips out of it.
Yeah, I'm sure she loved the trip to Hoffenheim.
No, she didn't come for that. She was like,
I didn't think so.
I'm not going to the stadium equivalent of an IKEA on a Saturday. She skipped that one, even though it was next to Heidelberg, which would have been a selling point. No, but she's coming to Berlin. Berlin was an easy sell. It was a very easy sell, and we are also planning to go to the second leg of the relegation playoffs in Elversberg. Mostly because neither one of us have been to Saarbrücken or the Saarland, so that was an easy sell too. But yeah, you're right. Our 56, that would have been a time before children, Stefan.
Well, luckily there's always someone on the internet doing it, so we can kindly pass on and let them do it for us. We'll live precariously through them, perhaps.
Have them on the show when they're done it all and survive.
Exactly.
Thoughts and prayers for some of these stadiums to get to, especially that IKEA stadium for Hoffenheim. It's a journey. It's a journey, man. It was not an easy place to get to. And then when you're there's nothing there other than a plain museum randomly. Anyways, let's call this quits. Final preview show of the season. This is it.
Final show of the season? Oh no, it's not the final show of the season. We'll do a reaction.
Recap, the Pokal and maybe the relegation playoffs. See who becomes the final club. See how that goes.
Yeah.
But yes, and then of course, once the football has wrapped up, we're going to take a little bit of a break. Do the transfer shows in the newsletter still. So if you subscribe, you're still getting your content. For the rest of you, we'll probably be back, I want to say, in August.
Yeah, we'll figure something out. We'll figure out how we're doing it before the last show.
Maybe. We'll see.
Yeah,
we'll be back.
We'll see. We'll see how many holidays we can fit in.
Don't worry, we'll be back. And for subscribers, we're not going to disappear. All right, man. This was fun. Let's call it quits. Until next time. Auf Wiedersehen.